The UK's worst prisoners. Now I'm going to do a little series about some of the UK's worst prisoners who you may not have heard of. So the one I'm going to be talking about today is a despicable cretin named Joseph McCann. Now Joseph McCann was initially serving an IPP sentence, believe it or not. And when I get into the story, you will find there was a lot of failings in this case, and there was a massive investigation afterwards into the probation service, which I will tell you later on in the video. So in December 2019, Joseph McCann was sentenced to 33 life sentences with a minimum term of 30 years, although this was actually appealed at a later date, and he was then sentenced to a minimum of 40 years in prison. Now, Joseph McCann is a beast, a bacon, what we refer to as in prison as a bacon. So the ones that are new to the channel, a bacon is a prison slang term for a nonce. And obviously on here, you've got to be careful with the terms that you use. Otherwise, it will be flagged up and the video will be demonetized, and it's advised that you don't upload it. So Joseph McCann was actually born on the 8th of February 1985, and he is described online as an English serial rapist. And it was in April and May 2019 when he committed these serious attacks in Hertfordshire, London, Greater Manchester and Cheshire against 11 strangers, ranging from the ages of 11. The youngest was an 11-year-old boy when he committed these despicable, heinous crimes against, and the oldest was a 71-year-old woman. So it just goes to show he didn't care what age his victims were. He was prepared to degrade them and act out his own sick fantasies, whatever the ages. He did evade the police for some time, who suspect that he was sheltered by a support network across the country. And for these crimes, he was tried at the Old Bailey, and it was on the 6th of December 2019 that he was convicted of 37 offences. Now, I will go a little bit back into his background, into his early life, his criminal history, because I've got a lot of notes that I've took from various articles written down in front of us, which I will go over, because in this mini-series, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go over a lot of the details, and rather than the way that I normally do my videos, these ones will be a little bit longer, and I will, like I've said, go back into the family history and the early life. So Joseph McCann was born in London on the 8th of February 1985 to a Scottish builder and mother with links to the Irish traveller community. He was reported as being one generation removed from travellers and part of a large travelling family. By the mid-1990s, the McCanns had moved to a council house on the Tyrrell Walk in Beswick, a district of Manchester. So his offending began around 1996, obviously when he was young, around about 11-year-old. Him and his brothers had actually ran a campaign of intimidation and crime in their neighbourhood, which happens with young people on these type of neighbourhoods around about that age, apart from this cretin, which I'll refer to him as. His offending went on to push the boundaries beyond anything that you would class as normal. This person was abnormal for the crimes that he went on to commit. So it says his first conviction was for theft when he was around 13-year-old, and others followed for criminal damage, possession of a knife, and stolen goods. Other incidents reported were stealing, setting fire to vehicles, and carrying out muggings, threatening elderly neighbours and intimidating young children attending a work club. Following complaints from the neighbours, the council filmed the brothers vandalising property, damaging cars and throwing bricks at people, with neighbours and council gathering evidence against the boys. In 1998, the council evicted the family from their home. So it just goes to show, but obviously I'd done sort of similar things when I was a youngster, around about that age, but when you see the things he was arrested for and what he was getting up to, muggins, that was a no-go. Elderly people, a no-go. Picking on young children, a no-go. You can just see from the young age that his offending was escalating and he was going to that next level of depravity. So the McCanns moved to Ardwick, also in Manchester, but the boys often returned to their old estate and continued with what the Manchester Evening Post called a campaign of terror. A police officer told The Guardian that there was a perception that they were untouchable. The three boys caused an enormous amount of problems for local people and committed a range of antisocial behaviour. The police continued to gather evidence from the neighbours, and in 1999, McCann and his brothers were subject to one of the United Kingdom's first ASBOs. I know exactly what these are because I was issued with one myself to keep away from certain areas when we were youngsters drinking and getting into trouble. Nothing like this one though. So the ASBO was the antisocial behaviour order, which they brought out obviously for unruly kids to ban them from certain areas. So they were banned from entering the Beswick area, using or engaging in abusive, insulting, offensive, threatening and intimidating language or behaviour in the city of Manchester, threatening or engaging in violence or damage against people or property in the city, and encouraging others to do the same. So the boys were photographed smirking and swearing at journalists after leaving court. Residents of Beswick were said to have been relieved by the order. The police reported that the crime rate had actually fell by a third, the burglary rate halved, and one supermarket claimed that its revenue rose by £14,000 a week after the ASBO had been imposed. Sounds a bit extravagant and a bit exaggerated, but this is what it says in the articles that I've been researching up on. So the brothers appealed the order firstly to the Crown Court and then to the High Court. Both failed and they took it to the Court of Appeal in 2001, which also rejected the appeal. In 2002, the House of Lords heard the case, which rested on whether an ASBO constituted civil or criminal proceedings under Article 6 of the European Convention on Human Rights. The distinction mattered because hearsay was inadmissible in criminal proceedings. ASBOs had been established to civil injunctions with criminal penalties, which allowed the hearsay of intimidated people to be admissible rather than demand that they appear as witnesses. It was ruled that the proceedings were civil and the McCann's case was therefore dismissed. Because of its wider implications, the ruling was discussed in academic literature. So after all this, in 2008, he received an indefinite sentence, which the IPP was brought out for people like this, which you could call predators, because that's what he is and that's what he went on to be. But I will tell you in detail what he got the actual life sentences for a little bit later on. So after the 1999 ASBO, the McCann family moved away from Manchester. The ASBO came as a relief to the residents but failed to solve the problems of the McCann's offending. The family then settled in the south of England in Aylesbury and Harrow, where the brothers continued to commit crimes including car theft and damage to property. By 2007, McCann was living in Bedford. He had fathered a young child but had not been present at the birth because he had been in prison. Then on December the 27th that year, he burgled the house of an elderly man in Cotton End. McCann threatened to stab the man and stole a purse. After McCann was recognised on CCTV, he was arrested, eventually pleaded guilty to aggravated burglary and was sentenced in September 2008 to an IPP, imprisonment for public protection, with a minimum term of 2 years and 6 months in prison. His partner was heavily pregnant with a second child at the time of sentencing. So the IPP, which a lot of people will know about on here, which I've talked about, which I was actually serving myself, which was terminated in September of last year, 2024. So the IPP is an indefinite sentence which will not be released until the parole board see fit that you no longer pose a risk. So McCann's IPP meant that his release would only occur after the minimum term and once the parole board became satisfied that he was no longer a risk to the public. So while serving his sentence, McCann was assessed by his offender manager as posing a high risk of harm to the public and known adults, as well as a medium risk to children, prison staff and prisoners. In 2009, his prison also intercepted letters suggesting he posed a risk of sexual harm. I can't say the term on here. As ridiculous as it sounds, if I say it, it will be flagged up. sexual. harm, I'll refer to it as. So 2 years later, police alerted his offender managers to intelligence from 2003 indicating that he might pose a risk of harm and exploit to little girls. McCann remained in prison for over 8 years. The parole board rejected his application for parole in 2010, 2012 and 2014. He carried out rehabilitation courses and risk reduction courses and was finally released on license in March 2017. While McCann served his sentence, his brother Sean killed himself while serving a 2-year sentence for assault and other offences, and he'd done this inside of HMP Peterborough. So he was rejected 3 times by the parole board because they could see he still posed a significant risk. So in the meantime, he carried out the rehabilitation courses, which are a load of shite inside a prison. It's just ticky boxes. I know because I've done it firsthand. I've done the courses and I've been in there serving an IPP. These courses are just ticky boxes. You can blag your way through the system. The only way you will deeply and truly change is if you change yourself, not by doing courses. Although some courses can help in a little way, but the majority of people do these as a way to get granted release. They bluff it. They go on these courses. The instructors just get them through the course and they say they changed. They no longer pose a risk. So on his release from prison, McCann was assigned to spend 12 weeks at an approved premises in East Anglia. Approved premises is a hostel, and obviously he's had to go and spend 3 months in there to prove that he can be trusted on the outside. So at the end of that period, he went to live with family in Buckinghamshire, which was approved as a temporary arrangement. However, in late July and early August 2017, he visited Manchester and began moving between other family addresses in Hertfordshire. As a result of this, his offender manager was unable to make contact with him. On the 18th of August 2017, he was arrested for car theft and burglary and subsequently remanded in custody. So what sticks out to me there? If your offender manager can't get in touch with you, you're obviously not coming to your appointments. They can't keep an eye on you. That is an immediate recall back to prison. That's what normally happens. Especially the probations that I had. If that was the case, it would be an immediate recall. So in January 2018, he was sentenced to 3 years and 4 months in prison for burglary and motor vehicle theft. When he was getting sentenced, the judge remarked that this would run concurrently with his IPP sentence. But and there is a but, which I find this absolutely crazy. But his offender manager team did not recall him on that offence. Had they done so, he would have had to appear before a parole board before being considered for release. Instead, his sentence was treated as a normal sentence, a determinate sentence, which meant that he would be released halfway through on licence. Now this I can't understand. If you're in prison, you're an IPP prisoner, even though you haven't been, they forgot to do a recall because you're serving that sentence anyway, which I find astounding, how he didn't get recalled when they knew he was in prison or when he got remanded. The probation finds out straight away, they immediately issue a recall. But somehow it didn't happen in this case. They probably didn't know about the IPPs that much because a lot of probation didn't. This is why there was a massive investigation. But if you're already in prison, I can't understand how the parole board wouldn't say we're not releasing you until we see fit. Just because the probation didn't recall you, you're already now in prison, you're IPP. Does that not mean you're staying? It does with everybody else I've come across. I know for a fact if I was in prison and they forgot to do me recall, but I was already in there, they would just say, all right, well, we're doing your recall whilst you're in there. Or the parole board would get involved and say, he's not getting released until we see fit. Can't get my head around that one, but this is the cases with the IPPs. So in late 2018 and early January 2019, staff at McCann's prison contacted the probation service, who were concerned that McCann had not been recalled on his IPP sentence. The senior probation officer reiterated that his predecessor had been responsible for the case at the time of McCann's sentencing, had made the decision not to recall him. The assistant chief officer who headed the probation service in Hertfordshire affirmed the decision in January 2019 out of concern that there was a risk McCann could challenge his recall at the late stage. Soon after, he was released on licence and prohibited from pursuing relationships with women. His offender manager was only able to find him a room at an approved premises, so he was permitted to return to his family address in Buckinghamshire. At the time of his subsequent offences in April, he was living in Aylesbury. So it goes on to say in early April 2019, McCann applied to his local authority to obtain housing for him and a new female partner. When told that they could not house him, he became rude to the staff, who then contacted his offender manager. Because his new relationship put him in breach of licence, he was issued with a warning. So he got the April letter on the 10th of April by the probation service issuing a warning. This was further discussed with him by his offender manager 8 days later, and on the 12th of April his brother Michael was sentenced to 6 years and 11 months in prison for carrying out a string of handbag thefts, credit card frauds and driving offences in Hertfordshire during 2018. So this is when it comes up to the most horrific offences that he committed and what he was given these life sentences for. So on the 21st of April 2019, McCann abducted and raped a 21-year-old woman in Watford, Hertfordshire. The abduction took place at 3:30 a.m. when she was walking home from a night out. McCann forced her into his car at knife point. He then took her to her house, raped her and released her that morning. How outrageous that someone didn't get recalled, then he goes on to commit this offence. This was just the start of his offending that went to the next level of depravity. He now knows that when he's caught for this offence, he's going back in on his IPP for a considerable amount of time. So he's thought, if I'm going back, I'm going to go on a rampage and commit the most severe offences. So Hertfordshire police identified McCann that day and added him to the National Police computer. Police, however, were only able to trace him, and just after midnight on the 25th of April, he abducted a 25-year-old woman in Walthamshire in northeast London, dragging her into his car. He raped and assaulted her for over 14 hours. She was still in his car when he abducted another woman. So whilst he's been doing these offences to her in the car over a 14-hour period, he's then went and abducted another woman while she's in the car, a 21-year-old woman in Edgware in North London. He attacked her as well. McCann drove to Watford with them in his car. He attempted to book into a hotel before one of the women luckily smashed him with a glass bottle, allowing them both to escape from the hands of this predator. The Metropolitan Police did not link these two later two attacks with the earlier one on the 28th of April. A manhunt followed as police released his name and offered a 20 grand reward for information, but he managed to evade police, who suspect that he was sheltered by a support network across the country. Like stated earlier on, he comes from a traveller family, so if they're not aware of the type of offending he does, they're obviously going to house him, and this is probably what he was doing. On the 5th of May, a week later, he met a woman at a bar in Greater Manchester and convinced her to allow him into her home. Now, this way it gets very graphic and disgusting and horrible, people, so bear with us through this traumatic event that took place. The daughter managed to flee the house, where he convinced this woman he met in the bar to let him into her home. He actually tied her up and raped her 17-year-old daughter and 11-year-old son at 8 o'clock in the morning. So while she was upstairs tied up, he's getting the 17-year-old daughter and 11-year-old son and done the most despicable act to both of them. He raped the pair of them. The daughter managed to flee the house, jumping from an upstairs window, and alerted neighbours. As McCann fled, the son untied his mother. At 1:30 p.m, McCann abducted a 71-year-old woman outside a supermarket and subsequently done the same thing to her. He raped that old woman. While still holding her, he abducted and assaulted a 13-year-old girl. They escaped at Knightsbridge services that evening. McCann then drove to Congleton in Cheshire, where on the same day at 6:30 p.m, he abducted two 14-year-old girls and threatened to kill them. He was spotted by police locally. Luckily, the coppers seen him. And this is where I talk about sometimes when people grief the coppers and say they're all bastards. I'll use that word. But if it wasn't for the coppers in this case, what would have happened to these poor 14-year-old girls? They gave chase, and in the pursuit, McCann crashed his car and fled on foot, leaving the girls unharmed. He caught a taxi, but the police noticed him at a roadblock near Congleton. He fled from the vehicle on foot. Police caught up with him, and he was discovered hiding up a tree down a country lane at 3 a.m. on the 6th of May. He was then arrested and detained. Luckily, they got him, they detained him, and that was the end of that horrid spree that he put so many defenseless victims through all that torment. So for these crimes, he was tried, like I said earlier on, at the Old Bailey, and on the 6th of December 2019, convicted of 37 offences. 3 days later, he was given 33 life sentences in order to serve a minimum of 30 years before he can be considered for parole. But on the 11th of December 2020, this was raised to 40 years by the Court of Appeal. And that was definitely a just. That raise from 30 to 40 years was most definitely the right decision. Never let that beast out of prison again. He doesn't deserve to walk the streets ever again. But he has now resided in HMP Wakefield, where he has actually, I have researched to see whether or not he's been attacked like the rest of these type of prisoners. They get attacked. They get their prison justice inside of prison. But this beast got into an altercation in 2000. Two seconds, people. So in 2021, he got into an altercation inside of HMP Wakefield, where he was fighting with two of the prisoners who tried to attack him, but he was obviously walking around with a self-defense weapon that he tried to say it was. In this case, he had a sharpened up toothbrush, so he got a nicking for that and obviously spent time down the block. But these two of the inmates did attack him, but it wasn't to the severity that the general public would have liked. But I will keep you updated on whether or not he gets attacked inside a prison, because it's only a matter of time before these type of offenders get some sort of prison justice and they get served up properly, HMP style. So after McCann's trial, the BBC News stated that the NPS, the National Probation Service, had not followed the correct procedures when he was sentenced in 2017. He should have been recalled on his IPP sentence. The report stated that the failure to do so was hugely significant because McCann would have not been able to apply for release until the summer of 2019 and would likely have been turned down, and he would have been kept in prison for a long time, especially when, whilst he was in prison, it was saying that he was deemed a threat to young people. And that cretin should have been in, but that is the case of Joseph McCann, and I thought I would do a little bit different, people. Give you a full rundown, obviously make the video a bit longer, and talk about the whole case, the ins and outs from the start to finish and where he is now. But do like do like me. Do hit the like. I was going to say it. Do let me know if you like this style of video, because I know a lot of subscribers wanted to hear the full ins and outs of the cases, and I have done this a little bit different, a little bit like I used to do my videos when I first started. So let us know if you like this style, people, and I will get more of these done. And hit us up. Let us know the names of prisoners that you would like me to do these stories on. But I am going to be doing stories on the worst prisoners inside of HMP Wakefield, and this is just one of them. I'm not going to rank them in order because they are all as despicable and horrendous as each other, but I'm going to do a load more of these type of videos. But getting back, before I finish, about the IPPs, this is why the IPPs have suffered, the ones that deserve to be out. Prisoners like this who have been serving an IPP sentence, they get released and then they go on to commit these type of offences. It makes it bad for the ones that are inside still on IPP, because the parole board doesn't let them out in case they go and do what this cretin done. And there has been cases of IPPs being released and then went on to commit murder, which is making it hard for the other IPPs left inside the system, suffering and struggling. But I will be doing more videos on the IPPs as well. But I'm going to leave that one there for now, people. Hopefully you are enjoying the content. And if you are still watching up till now, people, remember to comment, like, and double check to make sure that you subscribe to the channel, because it does make a massive difference. Thanks for watching, people. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe.